News now. Trade Union Federation Cosatu is lashing out at government's plan to review the public service wage agreement. At the same time, the Public Service Association is also slamming this proposal, saying public servants cannot afford to sacrifice their salary increases. For its part, Cosatu, in a statement, has rejected the proposed move, labeling it a direct attack on collective bargaining. It says if the issue is snuck into the budget statement today, this will be a declaration of war. Well, joining me now from our Cape Town studios is Cosatu's Tony Ehrenreich. Tony, good morning, and thank you very much for your time this morning. So it's a very strong statement that the Cosatu CEC, the Central Executive Committee, has issued on this, and a number of things sort of come out from me out of it. Declaration of war, and also that if this happens, the CEC will regard it as a declaration of war, and there'll be parting of ways with government going forward.
Well, it clearly stresses that it's a very important issue. This issue doesn't only affect public service workers, who the government now is reneging on an agreement that they have to give them increases this year that is unacceptable for public servants, but Cosatu as a whole is saying it's unacceptable. Because if the government does it today where they don't offer a wage agreement, tomorrow every other employee in this country is going to try and walk away from the wage agreements. And the whole notion of wage bargaining is an important tool to redistribute wealth in society in a way that undoes the legacy of apartheid. So government can't attack that architecture of the very basis of our society. And so the CEC was right in saying this is a declaration of war. And unless government stops these efforts, there's going to be not only the financial crisis that we see in the country at the moment, but also an industrial relation crisis, both in the public service, but across the economy, because all other employers and workers will be affected by this attempts to reduce their income.
How else do you think government then should address the ballooning wage bill, the cost of running the state? Because some sectors of South Africa are looking to Tito Mboweni to find savings somewhere.
Well, clearly we need to put in place measures to address what is a fiscal crisis in South Africa. The debt is growing, but we should look at that in the context of what are the key indicators of the trouble in South Africa. The President in the State of the Nation address clearly reaffirmed that inequalities are the biggest social challenge and social problem that will tear apart the social fabric of our society. So let's deal with inequalities. If we're going to focus on that, we know where we can get the money from. We're paying politicians and senior government employees too high salaries. They're still getting wage increases this year. That must stop. So if there must be a wage increase anywhere, it must be at the huge extravagance levels in our society. It's completely inappropriate that the black leadership of our country take on the very worrisome practices of the white leadership under apartheid, where the gap in income between the elites and the working class in South Africa is even higher than it was in 1994. So let's tax the elite, let's tax the wealthy, and let's make sure that we redistribute the wealth in the country in a way that addresses both the trust deficit but starts to speak to the real challenges that people have. An attack on the workers in the public service is completely inappropriate. We must reduce income levels of the higher income level people in the economy, government officials and politicians, and then we must deal with the private sector, inheritance taxes, land taxes, luxury good taxes. That's where we must focus on generating more income to a government now, not to the poor working class sector that's already burdened by rising increases and many other social pressures as a direct result of the collapse in public services that we've seen over the last few years.
Now, what are you going to be looking for in this afternoon's budget speech? I mean, I'm sure you're going to be listening very carefully to ensure that what you are picking up, that it's likely to be smuggled into the speech, does not happen.
Well, it's clear that nothing can be smuggled. This is a transparent process. We'll all know about it. We'll hear it on TV. And if there is any attempt to undermine the collective bargaining agreement in the public service, and as a result, the attack on all collective agreements in the country, then that will be seen as an automatic declaration of war. And government should be careful, because you can't have on top of the fiscal and trust deficit with a large section of your society now attacking wage agreements, because what you're going to see is that workers are going to rebel against a government that's not being seen to be sensitive to their needs. And the government must understand that their mandate comes from the ANC electoral mandate. And so Tito Mboweni, as the finance minister, must understand very clearly that his job is to give expression to the promises that have been made by the president in the State of the Nation address. So we don't want things that were outside of the nation, State of the Nation address. We want to address the economy, promote growth, deal with service delivery, improve the situation in many of the municipalities, focus on undoing the huge levels of inequality, because that's the key challenges. So that must be where Tito focuses his budget on. We're very concerned that for too long a time the finance minister has been making unilateral declarations that are sometimes completely out of keeping with government and with the ANC and the alliance orientation towards dealing with the crisis. So we've got to see an alignment between the budget and the State of the Nation address, and that must focus on growing the economy, redistributing the wealth, and making sure that we deal with many of the failures in our society over the last 25 years. Land reform is one of those. We've got to deal with the public transport system. We've got to ensure that the NHI provides a healthcare service that improves health services to all our communities. And then we've got to stop the huge inequalities between education of the elites in the suburbs and education in the townships. All children deserve the best opportunity that they can get now, and we've got to equalize that education offering. And that's what we want to see from a government. No more words. We want to see action, and part of that action is to deal with the corrupt. We want to see those who've been guilty of state capture and corruption now going to jail, swapping their Armani suits for orange overalls in jail, because as a society we're tired of the 10% that today still is being looted by corrupt actions. So we want to see the government put in place more than just commissions, but making sure that the corrupt and the thieves, that they now end up in jail, so that our people know we're serious about taking back our country from the brink of devastation as it was caused over the 9 lost years of deepening corruption and looting of state resources. But also the looting in the private sector, 20 billion rand in Steinhoff, many other institutions, that must be stopped, and private sector leaders must be seen in jail also. We must clean up our society, undo the legacy and the entrenchment of those apartheid practices, and build something that's in line with the values of the Freedom Charter that spoke about a country for all of our people, both black and white, and both rich and poor.
Okay, thank you very much, Tony Ehrenreich of Cosatu there. Very clear what they expect from Tito Mboweni this afternoon, and of course rejecting